we do have confirmation that the U.S. and NATO forces have now fully evacuated from the Victoria base in Baghdad. So that suspicion that I guess I had last night was correct. They did come under heavy attacks, even in the last 24 hours, by the pro-Iran Iraqi militias. It's not just these U.S. bases in the Gulf that are coming under attack and U.S. forces are being pushed out of the region by Iranian missiles. There's also U.S. bases in Iraq, as we know, and they are getting hit very hard. They've been getting hit hard this entire time, although no one has covered it. But I think it's worth covering given the fact that we've been in these bases for so long. They have such a negative history for the Iraqi people, and they're some of our biggest foreign bases in the Middle East, right? And you take into account the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, the Victoria base. We've got a few other bases in the country that have been getting evacuated and partial withdrawals over the past few years. Actually, some withdrawals at the beginning of this year from some of the bases. And even we're seeing in Erbil, we're seeing withdrawals there now as well. Other parts of the Kurdistan region, there's still some forces, but we're even seeing the withdrawal of private contractors now from Iraq, okay? But the largest U.S. base in Baghdad is the Victoria base. It's located just outside the Baghdad International Airport. And this is what the Victoria base has looked like pretty much every single day of the war thus far. It's been on fire, been hit with countless strikes by pro-Iran Iraqi militia groups like the Popular Mobilization Forces, like Al-Nujaba, and like Kataib Hezbollah. We covered the capabilities of these groups before the war began. You probably remember we did a dedicated video to it. And I explained to you all that these groups have very, very strong capabilities. These groups were responsible for striking that KC-135 out of the sky with the loitering surface-to-air S-358 missile that they fired up. These groups are the ones who have been launching. There's another group that's been launching these FPV drone attacks on the U.S. Victoria base in Baghdad. And now we are at a point where the U.S. Victoria base in Baghdad is being evacuated. Breaking news. We had this initial report from Saudi media and from some of our sources in Iraq. Members of the NATO alliance are leaving their headquarters in Baghdad. The U.S. is conducting their largest evacuation operation from Iraq since 2011. Around 200 soldiers are being transported from Baghdad to the Dermast base in southern Germany. So this is hundreds and hundreds of NATO soldiers, but also U.S. soldiers and U.S. contractors are being evacuated as well. We have video of NATO soldiers arriving in Poland after evacuating under the relentless strikes of pro-Iran Iraqi resistance in Baghdad. Spain, their forces withdrew their forces from Iraq as well. Poland has withdrawn its forces from Iraq due to the rising tensions, as they put it. And now we have news that the entire NATO mission has withdrawn from Iraq, citing security risks from the pro-Iran Iraqi militias. Now, this was pretty crazy. We saw this news early today. I think this was. Yes, NATO C-130 military transport aircraft had serious trouble landing at the U.S. Victoria base in Iraq due to a fire that broke out the base. So that was yesterday, but this video was published today. So a C-130 was trying to evacuate U.S. troops at the Victoria base in Baghdad, and we can't even do our evacuation, our withdrawal appropriately, correctly, right? Because there was a fire at the base from the strikes, and it couldn't land all day. It was just circling and circling and circling, and it couldn't get onto the base to evacuate the troops. As a result of this, what happened? As a result of this, we had news from the Iraqi militias today that in a deal that was brokered with the Iraqi government, the Iraqi pro-Iran Iraqi resistance factions, most of them, had agreed to a 24-hour truce with the U.S. and NATO to allow for the full withdrawal of forces from the U.S. Victoria base in Baghdad to Turkey. Okay, the only place where U.S. forces are now still operating in the country in very small numbers is in Kurdistan. okay, the Kurdistan region. But there was something very odd that happened. Not too long after this ceasefire, 24-hour truce was brokered, and we saw news that, okay, we're going to allow for these U.S. forces to withdraw, do the final withdrawal from the Victoria base, which is like the last major U.S. base that still hosts U.S. forces or U.S. contractors on federal Iraqi land. So other than Kurdistan, right, the Kurdistan region. Other than that, this is the last one. And about 3 hours after this truce was announced and the official statement was put out from the Iraqi resistance groups, what happened? We saw an attack on the Popular Mobilization Forces, which is a very large pro-Iran Iraqi resistance in the west of Iraq. Now, it wasn't immediately clear who was responsible for that attack. I still have not seen any news regarding blame being ascribed to either the U.S. or Israel in that attack. So we don't know if it was Israel who did that because, of course, this truce was just with the U.S. and NATO forces in the region. But also, since then, we have seen more reports of other explosions in Baghdad. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in this story and say we will come back to it at a later date to understand whether or not this ceasefire was violated in effect and whether that has now impacted the full withdrawal of the U.S. troops. My thoughts on this are that the withdrawal, the evacuation is still going to take place because the U.S. has no other options, just like they have no other options, especially looking at the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet Command Center in Bahrain. That place has been leveled. And here in the Victoria base, they were running out of air defense. They were using those, what do you call them, the CRAM that go up like that, and they look all crazy in the sky. They had no air defense. They had no way to shoot down these drones that were coming in on a daily and nightly basis. And this, I think, is the beginning of the end of U.S. forces in Iraq. This is actually kind of the end of the end, right? Leaving the last U.S. base on federal Iraqi land. I mean, this is the end of the end. So what a poetic ending. Hi, everybody. This part of the video is recorded later. I wanted to clarify the ending of this story. If you remember last night during the stream, I was getting lit up with phone calls, and that was because one of the negotiators between the pro-Iraqi resistance forces and the Iraqi government, who oversaw this whole operation, was trying to update me about what was going on, but the calls were not going through. So I decided to come back here and record one last video. We do have confirmation that the U.S. and NATO forces have now fully evacuated from the Victoria base in Baghdad. So that suspicion that I guess I had last night was correct. They did come under heavy attacks, even in the last 24 hours by the pro-Iran Iraqi militias. And the reason for that, and the reason why there were strikes that took place from the U.S. as well during the last 24 hours, was due to the simple fact that not all of the pro-Iran Iraqi militias decided to sign that 24-hour truce to allow for the U.S. to fully withdraw from the Victoria base. At its peak, the U.S. Victoria base housed 46,000 personnel. It functioned like a self-contained city. I mean, there's supermarkets, hospital, school, literally anything you could imagine is inside of that base. It was its own city. And it was one of America's largest foreign military bases for many years. We also have reports which confirm that coalition advisors also withdrew from Operations Command and Support Camp in Iraq. They have relocated to Jordan. And on their way out, this is a direct quote from our sources who led up the negotiations. The Americans detonated light and medium-sized equipment shortly before announcing their defeat and leaving. So that was obviously Trump's way of trying to, I guess, in some way, shape, or form, prevent a similar scenario to what we saw take place in Afghanistan with the withdrawal from Kabul. This is not the first base that U.S. forces have withdrawn from in the past, year even in Iraq. But due to the fact that this is happening under such a quick time span, under the impending threat of these Iraqi militia groups, they did decide to carry out these moves. So that is the full story. That's the scoop. And I say congratulations to the Iraqi people of ridding your soil of the American personnel. What was once 46,000 U.S. and NATO forces, now gone. And I repeat, the only place in Iraq left which still has any U.S. personnel is in the Kurdistan region. All federal land, U.S. bases which were on federal land, including private contractors, have now evacuated from the country, and they will not be coming back. As you can imagine, this base, like all of the other bases which have seen withdrawals and evacuations over the past few years, will be transferred into the hands of the Iraqi government fully now. And this is the end of the American occupation in Iraq. This is the end of the end. So, again, congratulations. And I guess the only place where they remain is the Kurdistan region. Even in Erbil, as I mentioned last night, they have been fully smoked out. So we'll see what happens next. But this is not going well for Trump. The only reason why we've now lost the Victoria base, our largest base in Iraq, is due to this war. So another feather in the cap for President Trump. I can't say I'm displeased. Can't say I'm displeased at all. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.